but we're told a lot of the time that the exemptions play a big part in being able to meet that, which is kind of concerning, especially when it comes to the bonuses. And because of all of this, with the dynamic deployment and the way this is working, you know, it has consequences at the same time. We look at the tragedy in Blackville where 3 teens were killed, and there's an empty bay sitting, you know, minutes away, and the paramedics an hour and a half away. What explanation can you give that justifies this?
Thank you for the question. And our hearts certainly go out to the incident in Blackville, but also incidents across the province. We do our best to get there as quickly as possible to the greatest number of calls. The nature of our business is dealing with emergencies and horrible situations across the province. The response times, as we indicated earlier, the notion of how do we better reinforce those local rural response times is at the heart of the discussions we're having at the moment, and trying to recalibrate the contract. However, I don't want to diminish the challenge that it poses, not just in rural areas, but also urban areas. And in the notion of being able to meet the same very high threshold that we've set for ourselves as a province everywhere, every year, it will be a challenge for years to come, but we can do a better job. And we've certainly committed to looking at how and what role the contract plays in that to make sure that there are no disincentives to providing essential and timely care in rural regions.
The paramedics tell us that this deployment, dynamic deployment, isn't working in rural areas, and the rural areas account for a vast majority of the province. If they disagree with this, if they're saying that it's not working, how come Ambulance New Brunswick continues using it?
At this time, Ambulance New Brunswick, as an organization and our management team, is pursuing the goals set out by the contract in the most effective means they can. So, and the goals set out in the contract are to get to as many people in New Brunswick as quickly as possible, irrespective of urban and rural. And it also has times for urban and rurals that are different, as we've indicated before. So it's incumbent upon EMA and B, and collaboration with government, to change those objectives in the contract if we want a different outcome. And that's the conversation government has committed to having, is to taking a look at those outcomes and making sure that we prioritize the outcomes that we want to see, including timely response is one of them. But as I indicated earlier, the conversation is needs to be much broader than that with respect to health outcome. Currently, we have a very simple delineation between urgent and non-urgent calls. But within the urgent calls, in most other provinces, they use, we've come to know it a lot, that the emergency scale, the CTAS levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, based on emergency. And in other ambulance contracts, sometimes you have, a lower response times for a CTAS 1, so an emergency, life-threatening, and lower response times in other cases where your operator can determine that it's lower urgency. So there's a lot of different ways to get to this, but we do recognize that we need to use our workforce better to reach different outcomes than simply trying to get there as quickly as possible for every single phone call we get.
Thank you. I just have a question about rapid response units. You have a rapid response unit where there's a lone paramedic who will go to a call as a first responder until another truck comes. But the majority of the time, they can only go to a certain distance to provide first aid, and then but it still doesn't get the people to the hospital any faster. Do you agree with the paramedics that this isn't working?
So I'll take that one, Rennie. On the contrary, I think what we're seeing is better response times, although that is not capped at this point, in these 5 different areas in rural New Brunswick. Many times, I'm just going to take a step back. These are RRUs, or rapid response units, are daytime only at this point, and they provide service for a 12-hour period. They do respond, and our numbers are showing that They get, many times they get there before the ambulance, so they can provide some important care to individuals that are in distress, or while waiting if a transfer is necessary. So as we were moving towards and we're looking at numbers, we're seeing that this is a great opportunity, and it's making a difference for New Brunswickers as we speak.
So in the last year, there were 94 graduated, 161 in the last 2 years. How many of those graduates from the 94 in the last year have stayed in New Brunswick and have gotten full-time employment?
EMAB wouldn't have the retention rates of graduate programs because we don't run the schools that graduate them. This being said, as we had presented in the table and where the numbers were coming from, so right now net new with departures, and I think that's where your question is trying to get to. In 2018, 2019, we had 67 new hires, but 54 departures for a net addition of 13 paramedics in our fleet. And we did a little bit better, I should say a lot better. In the last year, we had 94 new hires and 61 departures, leading for a net total of 33 additional. So we are reducing that vacancy rate as we go year to year, but we have not been able to fully meet the numbers as was indicated, with 93 vacancies still remaining.
And why do you feel that you're not being able, with 94 that have graduated, why do you feel that this has not been able to keep them here or to hire them to fill those positions?
Thank you. It's a great question. It's one that's been dogging not just our organization, the healthcare system as a whole. There is no doubt that the lifespan of a paramedic, and Mr. Savo can speak to it probably more eloquently than I can, is shorter than most other health professions. The job is very hard, both emotionally and physically. What we're trying to do now, and we see that in our retention rates, so there's turnover of staff is much higher than in other professions. The great opportunity we have with the combination of the integration of both programs and the new ways to practice paramedicine is that we can find other routes and other career paths. We started with the dedicated vans around transfers. We're looking at community paramedicine. We're looking at all kinds of pilot projects with EMP. We see our paramedics right now as Monsieur Dozier indicated, as a lot of the silent heroes out there, doing things that prior they wouldn't have done. So I think one of the keys for retention, we've always said, is really trying to figure out a complete career path so that paramedics that feel that they can no longer handle either physically or emotionally, because this is a very, very hard job. I think we all know that and respect that, that we can find additional career paths for them within the organization so they can keep contributing with their medical skills, with their clinical skills in different ways that doesn't necessarily pull on the same asset. So that's really the key, is the turnover rate is extremely high and the graduation classes aren't big enough to fill the hole. So the combination of those two issues, we've been trying to work at both retention and recruitment, and as indicated, are having success, but haven't not yet been able to go to the full staffing. And to be honest, we've never been able, as in either when we were independent individual organizations or the consolidated one. This isn't a new problem, but it's one that we've made progress on in a steady fashion.
My first question in this round is, how come unilingual advanced care paramedics cannot obtain full-time position, and every post for jobs that come up is posted bilingual?
So I can probably start with that questions. Thank you for the questions. One of the projects that we're currently working on is a lot of people call it flipping the tags, but I call it enhancing the ACP program in the province of New Brunswick. So we started working with a project team to establish that process. So in the next few months, if you're a paramedic and you're registered as an ACP with the Paramedic Association of New Brunswick, when you're working on a truck, you'll be able to work at that level.
Is it true that the rapid response unit work is only offered to bilingual paramedics, or is offered to the bilingual paramedics first?
I may take that one. So, as a reminder to the room, Ambulance New Brunswick has an obligation that every single unit have bilingual capacity, so that there is no exceptions made on our end. So anybody who responds, the official language of the Act requires the company not the company, our organization, to have bilingual capacity on every truck. In the ACP's case, they're an individual responder, so that does place an additional obligation. This being said, as Mr. Savoy indicated, the great news is that we will now be providing for all ACPs that are practicing across the province to be able to practice as an ACP. So that will ensure that there's, once again, career progression and appropriate remuneration for any advanced care paramedic, regardless of language or regardless of the position they occupy. But to the original question about the organized ACP services, the Official Languages Act is clear and has been clarified over the last years. Our obligation is that every single unit have bilingual capacity.
So if every unit doesn't have capacity, do those trucks go empty if you can't fill them with bilingual paramedics? Are they sitting
No.
idle because there's nobody
Never.
bilingual?
Never, as we've indicated prior in these proceedings. When we are not able to provide, we always try to provide for a bilingual unit. When we are unable to do so, then we move and we replace with a paramedic. We want ambulances on the road at all times, so there is never an ambulance sideline for language purposes. However, we are required by law that our organization is organized in a way that we could, if we can recruit sufficient amount of people, and that includes the type of positions and how we designate them with respect to linguistic capacity.
So when I asked earlier about the overtime given to bilingual before unilingual paramedics, and the answer was no, you seem to have some staff that are watching anxiously too, and I'm getting messages at the same time that say different. So I kind of tend to believe the paramedics that we've talked to in the past and the paramedics that are responding now, that this is not the case.
I just want to bring a clarification because I think it might be the way we understood the question. Back to our official languages obligation, we always have an obligation to try and fulfill the bilingual obligation first and foremost. So with respect to the people who get the first calls, we would be looking for a bilingual resource if there is no bilingual capacity on a truck. So we always do that. So absolutely, bilingual employees would be getting more of those calls by nature of the type of workforce that we have. However, the bilingual person cannot make, then eventually we move to the unilingual resources for those overtime shifts. So I hope that answers the question. I think the question was posed a bit differently last time, but if you're asking what we do in those cases, we always try to fill a truck with bilingual capacity if there is none currently on the truck. That's our obligation under the Official Languages Act.
So the answer was yes, it was given to bilingual before unilingual paramedics.
The answer is that, yeah, if there is a lack of bilingual capacity on the truck. Sorry, that's an obligation under the Act. So yes, if there's no bilingual medic on that truck, we are obligated to try and replace the bilingual medic that was supposed to be on the truck with another bilingual medic. And that's a legal obligation that the organization does not control directly.
Any of the unfilled positions now, are there, because I know of paramedics that are leaving the province because they can't get full-time jobs. So if there's unfilled positions and people that are looking for them, how come there is a gap that these people are not getting full-time positions?
So maybe I can answer that question. And there's lots of positions in New Brunswick available for paramedics. But what we found that a lot of them, they're not willing to move. So some of them would rather stay casuals instead of moving to a community where there's multiple vacancies.
And a lot of what I hear is that people are leaving the province because they can't get a position if they're not bilingual, which is unfortunate because we can't afford to lose any of the paramedics. And I hear this on a regular basis. So I don't have any further questions, just that I feel in the last few meetings that we've had, I hear you say that the best ambulance system, the best services, and how proud you are of reaching your numbers. And I see a lot of smoke and mirrors, and when I get messages saying it is deplorable how the committee's being lied to, it really raises some concerns. Can we have some, you talk about improving the system and putting things in place, can we have some timelines of when this can happen and when we can see some change?
Thank you, Ms. Conroy. There certainly on my part has been no lie, and I don't think there's been examples provided. So, but definitely with respect to timelines, as we indicated to the previous member, the initial timeline was March for the change in the outcomes, and then we're looking at additional time because of COVID. We are hoping to be able to get done within the second calendar quarter or the first quarter of next fiscal. Once again, the COVID situation is our biggest rate limiter at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions and answering the question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Mr. McKee.
I asked a little while ago, and I just wanted to get some clarification on it. Are you hiring unilingual ACPs for full-time positions?
Yes, some of those will be unilingual full-time positions because they're going to be working in an ambulance. So their partner could be bilingual and they could be unilingual.
So maybe if I could return to the question, Ms. Conroy, just to clarify, because I'm sure it's of concern to our employees and potentially to others as well. But so what we're doing now is we're moving away from establishing ACP positions to essentially, we're maintaining those that we have. We won't be creating additional positions. What we'll be doing is we'll be recognizing that an ACP practices always as an ACP. Whether he's whether he's working a shift in one of those areas in a one-person vehicle, or if he's working in a two-person ambulance, he would be paid at the salary rate of an ACP as long as he has the qualifications. So that's going to be the case across the province, which should let them practice to scope, and we'll make sure they have the equipment to do so as well, which we believe is great news. It'll lead to better care across the province. With respect to those current ACP services where they're in a one-man unit, as we've indicated prior, we have no ability to create full-time non-bilingual positions for those right now under the Official Languages Act, because each individual unit is required to be bilingual at this time. So, and there's only one person in the truck. So to your question, no, there is currently, to my understanding, and Mr. Sevo can correct me, there is no full-time positions in those services that don't require bilingualism.
You're correct.
So they're not able to work as a PCP because of language. That will also cause more people to move from the province to other provinces, again, creating a bigger gap in our system. And we've met with a lot of paramedics with the PCPs, and we were working strongly towards getting, and as we understood it, ACPs were working as PCPs, and so yes, that is a better, is definitely a better step towards it. But the language again is putting this province at risk of not having paramedics and enough paramedics filling the trucks, which is the whole vicious circle. So that's all with my line of questioning today, and I thank you very much, Madam Chair.